My name is Jenna Westbrook, and 24 hours ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I'd built a skincare empire from scratch. Turned my garage startup into a $40 million business that every influencer and celebrity swore by. My products were in Sephora, Nordstrom, and boutiques across the country. I had the penthouse in downtown Seattle overlooking Elliott Bay. The Tesla in the garage, the closet full of designer, everything. But none of that mattered when my phone rang at 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon and a voice I didn't recognize told me my daughter was dying. My ex-husband Richard and I had split 3 years ago. It wasn't pretty. He got the house in Medina, the one we'd custom built with the chef's kitchen and the infinity pool. I got my freedom and full custody of our daughter Lily, though he fought me tooth and nail for joint. The judge saw through his performance. Richard didn't want Lily because he loved her. He wanted her because losing meant admitting I'd won. When the divorce was finalized, he went radio silent for 6 months. No calls, no visits. No birthday card for Lily's 6th birthday. Then suddenly he resurfaced with Vanessa Pierce. 28 years old, Instagram model turned wellness coach, whatever that meant. She had the kind of beauty that came from filters and Facetune. All sharp cheekbones and plump lips and that dead look in her eyes that screamed insecurity. Richard paraded her around like a trophy, posting photos of them at charity galas and wine tastings. Her hand always draped possessively over his arm. He was 43 and acting like a college kid who'd just discovered bottle service. It was pathetic, but I didn't care. I had moved on. I was dating someone new, someone kind and stable and everything Richard wasn't. I was happy. Lily was happy. We had our little routines, Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday hikes in the Cascades, bedtime stories where she'd make me do all the voices. Life was simple and beautiful and ours. Then Richard decided he wanted to be a dad again. 6 months ago, he filed for modified custody. Said he'd gotten his life together and wanted to be more present. His lawyer painted this picture of a reformed man, someone who'd done the work, who was ready to step up. The judge was sympathetic. Richard got Lily every other weekend and 1 weeknight dinner. I hated it, but I couldn't fight it. He was her father. She deserved to have a relationship with him. Even if I thought he was a narcissistic snake who only wanted her back because his new girlfriend was playing house. But here's what nobody tells you about co-parenting with a monster. You have to smile and play nice even when every instinct is screaming at you to run. You have to hand your baby over to someone you don't trust and pretend like everything's fine. You have to ignore the way your daughter comes home quieter than when she left. The way she flinches when you ask about her weekend. The way she started hoarding snacks in her bedroom like she's preparing for a famine. I noticed the changes. Of course, I noticed. Lily had always been this bright, bubbly kid who talked a mile a minute about everything and nothing. But after those weekends at Richard's, she'd barely speak. She'd pick at her dinner. She started having nightmares. When I asked her what was wrong, she'd just shake her head and say everything was fine. I pushed, gently at first, then more insistently. Is Daddy's house okay? Does Vanessa treat you nicely? She'd nod, but her eyes would go somewhere else, somewhere dark and far away. I called Richard. I told him something was off, that Lily seemed different after her visits. He laughed. Actually laughed. You're being paranoid, Jenna. She's fine. Maybe she's just picking up on your negative energy. You ever think about that? What do you say when the person you know is hurting your child convinces everyone else that you're crazy? I took Lily to a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chun, no. Wait. Dr. Emily Hartman was patient and gentle. But after 3 sessions, she said Lily wasn't opening up. Kids often protected their parents, she explained, especially in divorce situations. She suggested family therapy with Richard. I agreed. Richard refused. Said I was trying to manipulate the situation, turn Lily against him. His lawyer sent me a nasty letter threatening to file for full custody if I didn't stop with the parental alienation. I backed off. What choice did I have? Then last month, Lily came home with bruises. Small ones on her upper arms. What happened, baby? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She wouldn't look at me. I fell at Daddy's house on the stairs. I didn't believe her. The bruises were in the wrong places, shaped like fingerprints. I took photos. I called Child Protective Services. They sent someone out to interview Lily. She told them the same story. She fell. The social worker was sympathetic but firm. Without evidence of abuse, without Lily disclosing, there was nothing they could do. Kids fell all the time. I was devastated. I knew something was happening, but I couldn't prove it. Richard's lawyer filed a motion claiming I was coaching Lily to lie, using her as a pawn in my vendetta against him. The court ordered a custody evaluation. I had to sit through hours of interviews with a psychologist who asked me invasive questions about my mental health, my relationship history, my ability to co-parent effectively. It was humiliating. The evaluator's report came back neutral, said both homes were appropriate, both parents capable, recommended maintaining the current schedule. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could nobody see what I was seeing? Then 2 weeks ago, Lily stopped eating. Not completely, but enough that I noticed. She'd push her food around her plate, take a few bites, say she was full. She started looking thin, hollow. When I asked her about it, she said she wasn't hungry. I made an appointment with her pediatrician. Dr. Patel examined her, ran some tests. Everything came back normal. Sometimes kids go through phases, she said. Keep an eye on it. Make sure she's getting enough calories. Try not to make food a battleground. I tried. I made all her favorites. I didn't pressure her, but she kept getting smaller and quieter and more distant. The weekend before the call, before everything fell apart, was Richard's turn. I packed Lily's bag, like always, her favorite pajamas, her stuffed elephant, her toothbrush. She clung to me at the door. I don't want to go, Mommy. My heart broke. I know, sweetie, but it's just 2 nights. Daddy misses you. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes. Can't you come too? I kissed her forehead. No, baby, but I'll be right here when you get back. I promise. Richard showed up 20 minutes late, like always. He barely looked at me, just took Lily's bag and herded her to his car. She turned back once, her face pressed against the window, and I waved until they turned the corner. That was the last time I saw her whole. When she came back Sunday night, she was different. Not just quiet absent. Like someone had reached inside her and turned off the light. I tried to talk to her, but she went straight to her room and shut the door. I stood outside listening to her cry, and I felt so goddamn helpless. Monday, she didn't want to go to school. I let her stay home. We spent the day on the couch watching movies, and I held her and told her I loved her, and that whatever was wrong, we'd fix it together. She fell asleep in my arms around 3. I carried her to bed and tucked her in, and went to my office to finish some work. That's where I was when my phone rang Tuesday afternoon. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ms. Westbrook, this is Seattle Children's Hospital. Your daughter Lily has been admitted to the burn unit. She's in critical condition. You need to come immediately. The world stopped. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember parking or running through the emergency entrance or screaming at the front desk until someone took me to her. What I remember is the smell. Burned flesh and antiseptic and something sweet and wrong. And I remember the sound of machines beeping and a nurse trying to hold me back as I fought to get to my baby's bed. Lily was unconscious. Her hands were wrapped in thick white bandages, her face pale and slick with sweat. She looked so small in that hospital bed, so fragile, and I thought I might die right there. What happened? I demanded. The doctor, a young woman with tired eyes, pulled me into the hallway. Someone held her hands on a hot stove. 3rd-degree burns on both palms and several fingers. We're doing everything we can, but the damage is extensive. She's going to need surgery, possibly multiple surgeries, and therapy. The pain management alone. I couldn't breathe. Who did this? The doctor's face hardened. She told the paramedics her stepmother did it. Said she was being punished for stealing food. The floor tilted. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. Where's Richard? Where's Vanessa? They're in custody. Police were called to the scene. Your ex-husband tried to leave before the ambulance arrived, but a neighbor stopped him. I left the doctor standing there and went back to Lily. I climbed into the bed beside her, careful not to touch her hands, and I held her the way I'd held her when she was a newborn, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. Because she is. She woke up around midnight. Her eyes fluttered open, and she saw me and started crying. "Mommy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Baby, you have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. I was just hungry. I ate a piece of bread from the counter, and she got so mad. She said I was a thief. She said thieves get burned so they remember. She turned on the stove and she grabbed my hands and she couldn't finish. The sobs took over. Not out loud, not to her, but to myself, to the universe, to whatever God might be listening. Vanessa Pierce was going to pay, and so was Richard. When the detective came to interview me the next morning, I was calm, cold, focused. "Ms. Westbrook, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about your daughter's relationship with Vanessa Pierce." I told him everything. The bruises, the weight loss, the withdrawal, the CPS report, the custody battle, the way Lily had begged not to go back. He took notes, nodded, said the department was investigating. "We've obtained footage from your ex-husband's home security system. I can't share details, but I can tell you that what we've seen is consistent with your daughter's account. Ms. Pierce has been charged with felony, assault, and child abuse. Your ex-husband is being charged as an accessory." An accessory? My voice was ice. He watched. He let it happen. "That's not an accessory. That's complicity." The detective sighed. "I understand your frustration. But legally, unless we can prove he actively participated or had prior knowledge of intent, accessory is what we can charge him with. The DA is pushing for the maximum. I promise you that." It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But I thanked him and told him I'd cooperate fully with the investigation. After he left, I sat in that uncomfortable hospital chair and I started planning. The police would handle the criminal side, but I wanted more than jail time. I wanted Richard destroyed. I wanted him to lose everything the way I'd almost lost everything. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be powerless and broken and desperate. I called my lawyer, Brad Henderson, the shark who'd handled my divorce. "Brad, I need you." "Jenna, I heard. I'm so sorry. How's Lily?" "She's alive. She's going to recover. And I need you to make sure Richard never sees her again. I want an emergency custody hearing. I want full custody. No visitation, nothing. Done. I'll file today. With the criminal charges, the judge will absolutely side with you." "Good, and Brad, I want more. I want the house, the cars, his business, everything." There was a pause. "Jenna, he doesn't have to give you any of that. The divorce is final. Unless what? Unless we can prove he was hiding assets during the divorce, or that his current financial situation is based on fraud. Then we could potentially reopen the settlement. But that's a long shot." I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Find me that long shot, Brad. I don't care what it costs. Over the next week, while Lily underwent her first surgery, I did what I do best. I dug. Richard thought he was smart. He thought his money and his lawyers and his connections made him untouchable. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. I hired a private investigator. Former FBI, the kind who could find things people wanted to stay hidden. Within 3 days, she'd uncovered a trail. Richard's tech company, the one he'd built after our divorce, wasn't exactly legitimate. He'd been cooking the books, inflating revenue to attract investors, then using new investment money to pay off old investors. A classic Ponzi scheme. And Vanessa, she wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his partner in crime, literally. She'd been helping him launder money through her wellness coaching business, funneling cash through fake client accounts. They were in deep. Millions of dollars deep. I took everything to the FBI. They were very interested. While the feds built their case, I focused on Lily. The first surgery went well, but the doctors said she'd need at least 2 more. The scarring would be permanent. She'd need years of physical therapy to regain full use of her hands. But she was alive. She was here. And every day she got a little stronger. We talked about what happened. Gently, carefully, with her therapists present. Vanessa had been starving her, Lily said. She wasn't allowed to eat unless she earned it by doing chores perfectly. If she messed up, she lost meals. That's why she'd lost so much weight. That's why she'd been hoarding snacks at my house. The bread that day had been sitting on the counter, and Lily had been so hungry she'd taken a piece without asking. Vanessa had caught her, and she'd decided to teach her a lesson. Richard had been upstairs when it started. By the time he came down, Lily's hands were already on the burner. Instead of stopping it, instead of protecting his daughter, he'd frozen. He'd watched for what Lily said felt like forever before finally pulling Vanessa away. Then he'd tried to convince Lily it was an accident. Told her that if she said anything, CPS would take her away from both of us and she'd end up in foster care. Told her it was her fault for stealing. That no one would believe her if she told. He'd spent the next hour cleaning up the scene, coaching Vanessa on what to say. Before Lily's screaming got so loud a neighbor called. 911. That's when he'd tried to run. The preliminary hearing was brutal. I sat in the gallery and watched Richard's lawyer try to spin the story. Try to make it sound like it was all Vanessa, like Richard was just a bystander, a victim of her manipulation. But the security footage told a different story. There was no audio, but you could see everything. Vanessa grabbing Lily, Lily trying to pull away. Vanessa dragging her to the stove, turning on the burner, forcing Lily's hands down. Richard walking in, stopping, watching, doing nothing. The judge denied bail for both of them. The trial wouldn't start for months, but the prosecutor assured me they had an airtight case. Vanessa would go to prison for a long time. Richard probably would too. But I wanted more. The FBI moved fast. Within 3 weeks, they'd raided Richard's office and frozen his accounts. His business partners turned on him immediately, cut deals to testify in exchange for immunity. His investors filed lawsuits. His house went into foreclosure. Everything he'd built came crashing down. And I watched it all from the front row. Lily came home for weeks after the incident. Her hands were still bandaged, but healing. She'd started smiling again. Small smiles, tentative, but real. We set up her room exactly the way she wanted it, filled it with new stuffed animals and books and art supplies. I took a month off work to be with her full time. We spent our days doing puzzles and watching movies and slowly, carefully, rebuilding what Richard and Vanessa had tried to destroy. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after everything happened, Lily was napping and I got a call from Brad. Stun, Jenna, full custody, permanent. Richard's parental rights have been terminated. He's never going to see her again. I closed my eyes and let the relief wash over me. Thank you, Brad. There's more. The bankruptcy court has ruled on Richard's assets. Everything's being liquidated to pay off his debts and his victims. He's going to spend the next decade in prison and the decade after that trying to rebuild from nothing. He's finished. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. And Vanessa, 23 years, no parole. She'll be 60 before she sees daylight. Good, it was good, but it wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But what do you do when justice isn't justice? When the punishment doesn't fit the crime? When your baby still wakes up screaming because she can't forget what it felt like to burn? That night, I tucked Lily into bed and she grabbed my hand carefully because her hands were still tender and she said, "Mommy, am I safe now?" I kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby. You're safe. I promise. No one is ever going to hurt you again." She smiled and closed her eyes, and I sat there watching her sleep and thinking about how close I came to losing her. How close they came to winning. But they didn't win. I did. We did. And every day that Lily laughs or plays or just exists in this world without fear, that's my victory. That's my revenge. Not prison time or bankruptcy or public humiliation. My revenge is her happiness, her healing, her survival. But there's something else. Something I haven't told anyone. Something I found out last week that changes everything. And when the truth comes out, when people finally see the whole picture, Richard and Vanessa are going to wish that jail was the worst thing that happened to them. Because what I discovered isn't just evidence of what they did to Lily, it's evidence of what they were planning to do next, and why they needed her out of the way. The truth is going to burn them both. And this time, I'll be the one holding their hands to the fire. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 months after Lily came home from the hospital. Plain manila, no return address, left in my building's mailroom with my name written in block letters across the front. Inside was a USB drive and a note. You need to see this. You need to know what they were planning. Check the drive. Then check your daughter's trust fund. A friend. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my laptop. There were dozens of files, emails, bank statements, legal documents, and video files. I clicked on the first one. It was security footage from Richard's house, but not from the day of the incident. This was dated 3 weeks earlier. I watched Richard and Vanessa sitting at their dining room table, papers spread in front of them. Having what looked like an intense conversation. There was no audio on this footage either, but I could read. Vanessa's lips well enough to catch fragments. Has to look like an accident. The trust fund transfers when she's 18, not if she's gone. I felt sick. I clicked through more files. Bank statements showing Richard was nearly $2 million in debt. Legal documents outlining the trust fund I'd set up for Lily when she was born, funded with stock from my company, now worth just over $8 million. And emails. So many emails between Richard and Vanessa planning it all out. How they'd slowly isolate Lily, make her look disturbed, plant evidence of suicidal ideation, then stage an accident. The abuse wasn't just cruelty. It was premeditation. They were going to kill her. They were going to kill my baby and make it look like she'd done it herself and then Richard. As her father and beneficiary on the trust, if anything happened to her before she turned 18, would inherit everything. The burn incident wasn't the plan. It was Vanessa losing control. She'd gotten angry and acted impulsively and ruined everything. That's why Richard had tried to flee. Not because he was scared of the abuse charges, because he knew if anyone dug deep enough, they'd find the real conspiracy. I spent the next hour reading every document, watching every video, my horror growing with each new piece of evidence. They'd been planning it for months, since before Richard filed for increased custody. The whole Reform Dad Act was just to get access to her. To set the stage, I called Brad immediately. I need you to contact the FBI and the prosecutor. I have evidence of a murder conspiracy. His voice went sharp. What kind of evidence? The kind that turns 23 years into life without parole. Within hours, my apartment was full of federal agents. They took the drive, took my statement, started pulling warrants. The lead agent, a woman named Torres, was cold and efficient. Ms. Westbrook, do you know who sent you this? No. The note said a friend, but I don't recognize the handwriting. We'll trace it. In the meantime, I need you to understand that this changes the entire scope of the case. If what you're showing us is legitimate, we're looking at conspiracy to commit murder. Federal charges. This is life in prison territory. Good, I said, because that's exactly what they deserve. Torres nodded. We'll be in touch. Don't discuss this with anyone. Not friends, not family, not social media. This is an active investigation. They left and I sat in my empty apartment and I cried. Not because I was sad, because I was so goddamn angry. They'd planned to kill her, my baby, my perfect, innocent little girl. And if Vanessa had kept her temper that day, if she hadn't burned Lily's hands, the neighbor hadn't called 911, the plan might have worked. They might have gotten away with it. I went into Lily's room. She was at school her first week back, doing half days with a special aide to help her manage with her bandaged hands. She was so brave, so much braver than I'd ever been. And they'd wanted to snuff that out, to erase her, for money. The next day, the story broke. Someone leaked it to the press, probably the FBI, to put pressure on Richard and Vanessa to cooperate. Local tech CEO and girlfriend planned to murder daughter for trust fund money. The headlines screamed. My phone exploded. Reporters camped outside my building. I had to hire security. Lily's school had to do the same. The attention was overwhelming, but I didn't hide. I gave one interview to a local reporter I trusted, and I told the truth. They were going to kill my daughter for money. They abused her. They starved her. They burned her. And all of it was just the beginning. If they'd succeeded, Lily would be dead right now, and everyone would have thought it was her own fault. That's the real evil here. Not just the violence, but the calculation behind it. The story went viral. National news picked it up. True crime podcasts started covering it. People were outraged, disgusted. Richard and Vanessa became the most hated people in America. Overnight, but I didn't care about public opinion. I cared about the trial. The new charges were filed within 2 weeks. Conspiracy to commit murder. Wire fraud. A dozen other counts. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard's lawyer tried to get it thrown out, claimed the USB drive was obtained illegally, but the FBI had verified everything independently, traced the financial transactions, found more emails on seized servers, interviewed Richard's business partners, who confirmed he'd talked about solving his financial problems once he got access to Lily's trust. The lawyer had nothing. Richard tried to cut a deal, offered to testify against Vanessa in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecutor laughed in his face. You want to testify that your girlfriend planned to murder your daughter and you just went along with it? That's your defense. You're going to prison, Mr. Westbrook. The only question is for how long. In the end, there was no trial. Both Richard and Vanessa pleaded guilty. Richard got 45 years. Vanessa got life without parole. The judge, an older woman with steel in her voice, looked at them both during sentencing and said, "You targeted a child. Your own child. Not out of passion or desperation, but out of greed. There is no place in civilized society for people like you. I hope you spend every day of your remaining lives thinking about what you tried to do and feeling the weight of your depravity." I watched from the gallery and I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just emptiness. They were gone. They couldn't hurt Lily anymore. But the damage was already done. Lily's recovery was slow. The physical therapy was painful and exhausting. The emotional therapy was worse. She had nightmares constantly. Panic attacks when anyone touched her hands. She was terrified of kitchens, of stoves, of cooking. Simple things that most ATROs didn't think twice about sent her spiraling. But she fought. Every day she fought. And slowly, incrementally, she started to heal. 6 months after the sentencing, we had a small victory. Lily made dinner. Just a simple pasta dish, but she did it herself, standing at the stove with me right beside her. Tears streaming down her face, but her hands steady. When it was done, she looked at me and she said, "I'm not scared anymore, Mommy. I'm angry." I hugged her. "It's okay to be angry, baby. Choose it. Let it make you strong." She nodded, and something shifted in her eyes. A hardness. A determination. My girl was becoming a fighter. Around that same time, I finally found out who sent me the USB drive. Torres called me one afternoon and asked me to come to her office. When I arrived, she had another agent with her, younger, nervous-looking. "Ms. Westbrook, this is Agent Ryan Foster. He has something to tell you." Foster cleared his throat. "I sent you the drive." I stared at him. "You, why?" "Because I was assigned to monitor Richard's communications when we first started investigating his financial crimes. Before the abuse incident, I saw the emails between him and Vanessa. I saw what they were planning, and I reported it to my supervisor." My blood went cold. "You knew?" You knew they were planning to kill her and you didn't do anything. I tried, he said, his voice breaking. I filed a report. I said we needed to move immediately, get a warrant, put surveillance on the house. My supervisor said we didn't have enough evidence yet. Said conspiracy charges are hard to make stick without proof of an overt act. He wanted to wait, gather more intel. I argued, I pushed. He shut me down. Told me if I didn't drop it, he'd have me reassigned. Torres jumped in. Foster came to me after the burn incident. Told me everything. That's how we moved so fast on the fraud charges. But by then, the damage was done. I looked at Foster. You sent me the drive because you felt guilty. He nodded. I thought if you had the evidence, you'd get justice faster than we could. I was right. I'm sorry, Ms. Westbrook. I should have done more. I should have fought harder. What happened to your daughter? He couldn't finish. I should have been furious. I should have screamed at him. But looking at this kid, he couldn't have been more than Hive, who'd tried to do the right thing and been shut down by bureaucracy and cowardice. I just felt tired. Thank you for telling me, I said. And thank you for sending the drive. You did more than most people would have. After that meeting, I went home and I held Lily and I told her the whole story. She was 9 now, old enough to understand. A man knew what they were planning and he tried to stop it, but his boss wouldn't let him. So he made sure we got the evidence anyway. He saved you, baby. Even though he couldn't save you the first time, he made sure we could fight back. Lily thought about that for a long time. Then she said, I want to meet him. I arranged it through Torres. Foster came to our apartment one evening and Lily sat across from him and she said, thank you for trying to help me. And thank you for making sure my mom could protect me. You're a good person, Foster cried. Actually cried. And I saw then what I'd missed before. He wasn't just some agent who'd made a mistake. He was someone who'd carried the weight of that failure every single day since. Lily had just given him permission to put it down. From that point on, things got better. Slowly but surely. Lily's hands healed to the point where she could do most things normally. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they didn't limit her anymore. She went back to school full-time. Made friends. Started playing soccer, laughed again. Really laughed. And I rebuilt too. My business had taken a hit during everything. I'd been so focused on Lily that I'd let things slide. But my team had held it together, and when I came back stronger. We launched a new product line. Expanded internationally. I donated a portion of our profits to organizations that supported child abuse survivors. Turned our pain into purpose, but the real turning point came a year after the sentencing. Lily came to me with an idea. Mommy, I want to help other kids. Kids like me who are stuck with bad people and nobody believes them. I want to tell my story so they know they're not alone. I was hesitant. Baby, that's a lot. Are you sure you're ready? She nodded. I'm ready. And I'm not scared anymore. They can't hurt me. But my story can help people. That's stronger than anything they ever did to me. So we went public. Lily and I sat down with that same reporter and we told the whole story. Lily talked about the abuse, the starvation, the burn, the fear. And then she talked about surviving, about healing, about fighting back. The interview went viral immediately. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from other survivors saying thank you, saying me too, saying your story saved my life. Lily became this symbol. This tiny, fierce warrior who'd looked evil in the face and refused to let it win. People started reaching out, asking her to speak at events, to share her story with advocacy groups and schools and anyone who'd listen. And she said yes, every single time. At 10 years old, my daughter became an activist. She testified before the state legislature advocating for stronger child protection laws. She spoke at conferences about recognizing signs of abuse. She started a foundation with money from her trust fund, the Trust Fund. Richard and Vanessa had tried to steal to provide legal support and therapy for kids in abusive custody situations. She took the worst thing that ever happened to her and she turned it into a weapon against the people. who'd tried to destroy her. I'd never been more proud. But the story doesn't end with Lily's advocacy. It ends with a courtroom. 2 years after Richard and Vanessa were sentenced, I got a call from Torres. "Jenna, we've got something." Foster kept digging into Richard's supervisor, the one who blocked the investigation. Turns out he was on Richard's payroll. Richard had been bribing him to look the other way on the financial crimes. When Foster reported the murder conspiracy, supervisor buried it because he knew if we arrested Richard, his own corruption would come out. My hands clenched. Are you telling me that Richard's supervisor knew they were planning to kill Lily and he did nothing because he was being bribed? Yes, and we can prove it. He's being charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, accessory before the fact. He's going to prison too. The trial was quick. The evidence was damning. Richard's supervisor, his name was Gordon Hale, and I'll never forget it, tried to claim he'd just been doing his job, that he hadn't taken the murder conspiracy seriously. But the bank records showed hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from Richard's accounts too. The emails showed Hale explicitly telling Richard he'd handle Foster and make sure the investigation stayed focused on finance. The jury convicted him in less than 3 hours. He got 30 years. And with that conviction came something else. Something I hadn't expected. Closure. Every person who'd enabled Richard and Vanessa, who'd looked the other way or actively helped them, was finally being held accountable. The system that had failed Lily had corrected itself. It wasn't perfect. It hadn't prevented her from being hurt. But it had eventually delivered justice. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. The day after Hale's sentencing, Lily and I went to the beach. It was early morning, the water cold and gray, the sand empty except for a few joggers. We walked along the shoreline, and she picked up shells and threw them into the waves, and she seemed so light. "So free, Mommy?" She said, "Yeah, baby, I'm happy." Stopped walking. Looked at her. "You are." She nodded. "I'm happy. I know bad things happen, but I'm okay now." We're okay. And I'm going to make sure other kids get to be okay too. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do with my life. I pulled her into a hug and I cried for the first time in months. Not sad tears, grateful ones. Because my daughter wasn't broken. She was bent but not broken. Scarred but not destroyed. Hurt but not defeated. 3 years after the burn incident, Lily testified before Congress. She was 11 years old. And she stood in front of a committee of senators and representatives, and she told them her story. She showed them her scars. She explained how the system had failed her and how it could be better. She asked them to pass legislation mandating faster response times for abuse reports, better training for investigators, harsher penalties for people who obstructed child protection cases. And they listened. 6 months later, the bill passed. It was called Lily's Law. My baby had changed the law, had made the system better for every kid who came after her. When the bill was signed, she was invited to the White House. The president shook her hand and told her she was a hero. She smiled politely and said, "I'm not a hero. I'm just a kid who survived. The heroes are the people who believed me and fought for me." That night, we celebrated. Just the two of us in our apartment with pizza and ice cream and too much soda. She fell asleep on the couch and I carried her to bed like I used to when she was small. And I whispered to her the same thing I'd whispered every night since she came home from the hospital. "You are so loved. You are so strong. You are going to change the world." And she was. She is. Today, Lily is 12. Her hands work perfectly. The scars have faded to thin white lines that she says look like lightning bolts. She plays piano. She writes stories. She still has nightmares sometimes, but they're less frequent now. She's in therapy and she's thriving. Richard is in federal prison in California. I heard through Brad that he tried to appeal his sentence and it was denied. He'll be 70 when he gets out. If he lives that long, Vanessa is in a maximum security facility in Washington. Life without parole means exactly that. She'll die there. Gordon Hale is in prison too. And Agent Foster, He left the FBI, started working for Lily's foundation as head of security. He takes kids to and from therapy appointments, makes sure they're safe, follows up on cases that slip through the cracks. He's become part of our family in a way, proof that good people exist even in broken systems. As for me, I'm still running my company, still building my empire. But now it means something different. Success isn't about money or recognition. It's about using what I have to make sure what happened to Lily doesn't happen to anyone else. Every product I launch, every dollar I earn, it goes back into protecting kids, into changing laws, into making noise. I learned something through all of this. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. Taking your pain and turning it into something that matters. Something that lasts. Richard and Vanessa tried to take everything from me. My daughter. My happiness. My future. Instead, they gave me purpose. Last week, Lily and I were driving home from one of her speaking events, and she said something that stopped me cold. "Mommy, do you think Daddy ever thinks about me?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Probably, baby." Why? Because I think about him sometimes. Not in a sad way. I just wonder if he knows what he lost. If he understands that he could have had a daughter who loved him, and instead, he has nothing. I pulled over, turned around to look at her. What he did was unforgivable. You know that, right? You don't owe him anything. Not forgiveness, not understanding, nothing. She nodded. I know, and I don't forgive him. But I'm not angry anymore either. He's just this sad man who made terrible choices and now he's paying for them. I'm not going to let him take up any more space in my head. I've got better things to do. And there it was. The final piece of healing. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just indifference. The ultimate revenge is living well, living fully. Refusing to let the people who hurt you define who you become. Lily had figured that out at 12. It took me 38 years to learn it. So here's how the story really ends. Not with Richard behind bars or Vanessa locked away forever, or even with Lily's law being passed. It ends with a little girl who was burned and broken and brutalized, deciding that none of that gets to be the end of her story. It ends with her choosing joy, choosing purpose, choosing to turn her scars into strength and her trauma into triumph. It ends with her standing on a stage in front of hundreds of people saying, "What happened to me was evil. But I'm still here. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other kids know they can be here too. That survival is possible. That healing is possible. That happiness is possible even after the worst thing you can imagine." That's the revenge. That's the justice. Not the court cases or the prison sentences or the public humiliation. The real victory is that Lily won. She survived. And she's going to spend the rest of her life making sure they know it. Nobody burns my baby. Nobody. And anyone who tries will learn what I learned. That a mother's love is the most powerful force in the universe. That a daughter's courage can change the world. And that people who traffic in cruelty and greed will always, always lose in the end. Not because the system is perfect. Not because justice is guaranteed. But because there are people like Lily who refuse to stay down. Who refuse to be silent. Who take their pain and weaponize it into hope. That's the real ending. Not revenge, redemption. Not for Richard or Vanessa. They don't get redemption. But for me and Lily, for every survivor who hears her story and finds the strength to tell their own. For every kid who's trapped and scared and thinks nobody will believe them. Lily believed in herself enough to survive. And now the whole world believes in her too. That's how you win.
That's how you make sure the people who tried to destroy you lose everything. You become everything they tried to prevent you from being. You live, you thrive, you shine so bright they can see it from their prison cells and know they've failed. And every single day that Lily wakes up happy and safe and loved is another day that Richard and Vanessa have to live with the knowledge that they lost. They gambled everything on silencing her, and instead they gave her the loudest voice in the room. That's justice. That's revenge. That's the ending. Before you click away, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm grateful you spent these moments with me. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Another powerful story is coming soon. Until then, take care, stay strong, and keep going.